Spoiler warning. Today's episode contains spoilers for the web fiction Worm and the movie Pulp Fiction. Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Eneasz Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber.
I'm Jay Sticky.
And I'm David.
David is back with us because last time we were talking about libertarianism and we got a whole lot of David, but we didn't actually get to ask most of the questions, and I guess there's going to be like a part 2 now where we grill him on why his philosophy is so terrible and and how he can possibly defend himself.
Last time was us learning stuff. Now is defending the thesis against us.
Yes.
Sounds fun. All right. But first, we start, as always, with Steven talking about TVs and movies. So,
as always,
this is
wouldn't be an episode of the Bayesian Conspiracy without it.
Thank you. I'm glad you get the brand. All right. So, we went 2 years without Marvel stuff. As you guys recall, 2019, April was when Endgame came out.
Oh.
And then we
if
had...
you're about to talk WandaVision, I haven't seen it yet, so...
Oh, don't worry. I won't say anything other than you should see it, and it's amazing, and I loved it.
Okay.
So that was on for 9 weeks, or however many weeks it was.
It was
then,
9.
Then we had a week off, and then on Friday, Falcon and the Winter Soldier came out.
Oh, cool.
And it was great.
Was it?
Yep.
All right.
I really enjoyed it. There's a part that's supposed to make you feel mad, and it made me feel very mad, and it worked. And I'm super into it. I love it.
Okay,
and it's playing two different kind of stories at the same time. Anyway, love it. All right. So that's the end of Marvel stuff. Wait, were you gonna say something?
Huh? No, I was saying I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of looking forward to stuff that's superhero related, the Snyder Cut came out on Thursday of Justice League.
Okay.
Everyone in the audience, raise your hand if you saw Justice League. Okay, I saw about 60% of hands go up. Leave your hand up if you liked it.
Wait. Where did you see 60% of hands go up?
I can just see the audience. You can't see them?
If 60% of our audience saw the Justice League, I would be very surprised.
I'd be surprised if it was... I bet that's about right.
Really?
A little over 1 in 2 people.
I want to put out a survey now because I think our audience has better taste than that.
Okay, well, if you like taste and you like DC, might I recommend the 4-hour Snyder Cut?
Oh my god!
It was actually it brought the movie from crap to great.
Really?
Yeah, like it did. So the reason it sucked is because it gave us 5 characters, I guess 6, 3 of which we'd never really seen before, cared about.
It tried to do the Avengers movie without doing the 6-year build-up where you get to see all the heroes first.
Yeah, you don't get to skip without
these assholes.
Yeah, you don't get to skip doing the heavy lifting. And so the 2 main people that you don't know anything about yet are Cyborg and Flash, right? Because Aquaman gets his own movie after this, I guess. But whatever. Wonder Woman had hers. Batman, Superman, we all know. Cyborg and Flash play a big part in the Snyder Cut, and the main thing that made that movie rough was that. Snyder did 300, right? Mm-hmm. The movie's supposed to feel kind of like that.
Okay.
And then Joss Whedon did The Avengers and Buffy, and it's hilarious and fun and great.
Yeah.
But they're great in different dimensions. And when you mash them together, you're mixing together pumpkin spice and funfetti cake, right? This is not, you're sure they're great desserts, but together they suck.
Okay.
So this is all pure, unfiltered, uncut Snyder, and it's awesome. Flash and Cyborg actually get arcs. Or at least they get stories. They don't really they have some arc, whatever, but there's some character stuff, but all of the disjointedness where you get a joke thrown in where it feels really inappropriate because that's when Whedon had a chance to shoot stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All that's gone. There's still funny moments, but it's no longer the off-brand humor.
Okay.
So I just finished it this morning. It was great. I strongly recommend the Snyder Cut. It was a lot of fun.
Okay.
I watched it this morning.
I watched it starting Friday. I watched it in 3 sittings. I did not sit through a 4-hour movie. Yeah.
Okay.
That is a lot of sittings for a movie, but 4 hours, I guess.
It's nice enough to give you breaks. I think there's 6 chapters and an epilogue.
I mean, WandaVision is a 4-hour movie, basically.
Yeah, but I watched it 1 week at a time.
So how similar in style is, I'm assuming not at all, Falcon and Winter Soldier compared to WandaVision?
It's delightful. I without giving anything away, I just Rachel. I turned to Rachel 10 minutes in. I'm like, compare this to the first, and she finished to the first 10 minutes of WandaVision. I'm like, exactly. It
I'm assuming it's more of an action movie as opposed to like a psychological thing.
So far, so good. Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, well, actually,
so
there's tons of psychological stuff too, because it's. I mean, we'll get there, but yeah, it opens with a badass action scene where
the first 3 episodes of WandaVision have like existential horror woven in.
Right.
Yeah, that was good shit.
But there was no fighting.
Okay.
Right. This one starts off with badass fighting. It's great.
Okay.
Existential horror is my favorite kind of horror.
Yeah, me too. God, I loved it so much.
I think you're gonna love WandaVision. All right, so that saves our movie digression. Try not to leave it too long, but I just had to share because I just finished Snyder Cut that it was, like I said, it brought that movie from bad to great.
Okay.
Like, it's at least as good as the middle tier Marvel movies.
Huh.
So
I mean,
That is genuinely surprising.
I wasn't all that into the middle tier Marvel movies either.
this one's fun. It's gritty and dark, like the way that it was supposed to be.
I mean, I like gritty and dark.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. After basically everything that the DCU has shit out, I just don't have much faith.
I think if you watch this and you're like, if you're like me and you remember Justice League and you're like, oh, I remember the movie that did this, and you're like, oh wait, they're not even doing that part.
Oh, I didn't even watch the Justice League.
Oh, well,
Maybe.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
just
saw
watch
Batman
this
vs
version.
Superman, and I was like, "That's all that I'm ever going to watch."
there's no saving that movie yet.
No.
I don't think there's plans to try and hack together a good version of that. But this was fun. I had a good time with it.
All right.
All right.
You still with us, David?
Yep.
Everyone else is checked out.
Yeah.
But Marvel with me is always like this is a bad segue. Cached thought. I was gonna shove that in
That
there.
was a terrible segue.
Yeah.
Stephen. How dare you?
I can do better.
Yes. Don't lower yourself to that one.
All right.
So Cash Thoughts, he brings it up because the first Let's Wrong sequence this week is called Cash Thoughts, and this is a really famous one.
It's also, I love how the beginning of it is just Eliezer complaining about how poorly designed the brain is.
Yes.
And like who would make something like this? We were kind of just talking about that before the episode about like how we humans as a species are just like terribly designed.
Yeah, our meat suits suck. But people say like, oh, the brain sucks. It'd be nice to remember stuff. It'd be nice if I didn't get tired. Those are all like easy complaints. He's like, no, look at just how badly it performs objectively to any other like substrate of information processing.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
It starts with, so one of the single greatest puzzles about the human brain is how the damn thing works at all when most neurons fire 10 to 20 times per second, or 200 hertz tops. In neurology, the 100-step rule is that any postulated operation has to complete at most 100 sequential steps. You can be as parallel as you like, but you can't postulate more than 100, preferably fewer, neural spikes one after the other. Can you imagine having to program using 100 hertz CPUs, no matter how many of them you had? You need 100 billion processors just to get anything done in real time.
Which is great because that's about how many brain cells there are, right?
Yeah, that's what we're operating off of. We're a kludge job.
I read that, and like I read 200 megahertz because I'm just used to seeing megahertz.
Yeah, you're like, wait, hertz.
And then you read it out, and it was hertz, and I was like, oh my god.
So,
but he does say that if you were stuck using such horrible hardware, one trick you'd use as heavily as possible is caching. That's when you figure something out once, you do the mathematical operation once, and you store the results so that you can just look them up later, which is heavily done when doing things with pi and any large complex numbers. You usually have a lookup table. At least you did back when I learned programming. Maybe nowadays computers are fast enough they can do it on the fly.
Now they've got a whole service that's dedicated just to caching.
Oh, okay.
Or you cache it so that you remember, all right, I'm going to put this in the queue when the queue opens up, that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, hey, I've got this. Let me work on it while I've got it before we're ready to send it off. And then you hold it, and then you can free up the thing that's doing the working to do other stuff, but the thing holds it. Yeah, so that's still totally a heavy feature.
Okay.
yeah. The article says it's a good guess the actual majority of human cognition consists of cache lookups.
Yeah. And
And then this thought does tend to go through my mind at certain times.
So he gives an example of someone being told by his neighbor that you can knock out a chimney you can remove a chimney from a house by knocking out the fireplace, letting the bricks drop, and then knocking out those bricks, etc. And it did not go well when years later he tried it.
I'm assuming he saw that, the person who told him that saw that in a cartoon.
It must have been, yeah. Or maybe he saw it in a cartoon and just, I don't know. And said, yeah, if you'd questioned that idea, you'd realize it's a stupid one, and you should have recomputed that, but you just didn't. Do we have examples of common cache thoughts that we use?
I had a bunch that I thought of when I read these the other day, and I'll try and think of some over the next minute or two and try to remember some. I mean,
David sounded.
What?
It sounded like you were about to say something.
Yeah, so I guess my cached thought when talking about caching in the context of not computers is that the chapter on caching and algorithms to live by is probably the best in the book.
What is Algorithms to Live By?
Oh, you haven't heard of it?
I've heard of it, but pretend that I am a new listener.
Okay, fair. So it's a book basically taking a bunch of concepts that are commonly used in computer science and programming and talking about how you can use them to improve your daily life. Talks about sorting, caching, etc. It's quite good.
It was by Tom Griffiths and Brian Christian. They were on episode 161 of Rationally Speaking. So if you like not reading but still learning about books, that's the way to go. Or it's a good starting point.
They were also on an episode of the 80,000 Hours podcast. I don't know the number offhand. I'm not a stone cold badass like Steven.
Yeah, I'll pretend like I remembered the number.
He just has all the episodes of Rationally Speaking cached in his brain.
That's right. I leave no room for important stuff like birthdays or, I don't know, how to get home.
I think one of my cache thoughts is generally conspiracy theories are ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of like specific complete the pattern ones, and I had some because like it's easy enough to think of the, like derisive ones that I disagree with this, right?
Yeah.
But like, what do I automatically fill the response with when I hear something? And I'm sure there's literally hundreds, and I'm just it's not. It's the thing is about these. It's not labeled in a box in your head called fake shit, right?
Right.
So like, I can't just go look at that box and see what's in there.
And like, not all cache thoughts are fake.
Yeah.
Right. Most of them are great. Like that's why they're there. They're reliable.
As is pointed out in the post. Oh, go ahead.
So this is a terrible segue because we're not going to the main segment, but I'm pretty sure I have cached government programs are bad.
Yes.
I definitely need to when I immediately hear of a government program, like my reflex thought is to try to figure out how it's terrible, and then I usually do. And then sometimes I don't, and then I have to actually think about things.
I mean, related to that, I mean, I see it all the time where people are like, I don't know, whatever situation, Bezos made, he 4x'd his money in the last year or something. Oh, capitalism's terrible.
Right.
And like, this is why or something. And it's like, it might be, but like you need to just be able to articulate the entire thought.
Yeah.
Right.
I was talking to a friend yesterday, and I forget, it might have actually just been me talking about what we're about to talk about today on the podcast, but they just said billionaires shouldn't exist.
Oh, God.
And I've heard them say that a few times where they're just like, nobody should have $1 billion. And I was just like kind of asked a couple of follow-up questions, like, what do you mean by that, basically? Or like, what about this scenario? And they hadn't actually thought about the thought.
Yep. America's the worst. I hear a lot too.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh yeah, this country is the worst. And it's like, don't get me wrong, I'm not, a flag swinging patriot, but we do some things pretty good, and we do lots of things a lot better than the worst.
Yeah, we're not the worst.
We're not the literal worst.
I mean, have you seen South Korea? I mean, Korea. No, South Korea's awful.
North Korea.
Yeah.
Best Korea.
God.
Eliezer does point out in the tribe that the vast majority of our computations are probably cache thoughts, because he says no one can think fast enough even to he didn't say even. No one can think fast enough to recapitulate the wisdom of a hunter-gatherer tribe in one lifetime, starting from scratch. As for the wisdom of a literate civilization, forget it. And I think that's true, which is part of the reason why it took humanity so long to get from hunter-gatherers to where we are now, because it's hard figuring out even what shit you can eat that won't poison you.
Yeah, I mean, record keeping.
As you recently learned.
Yes.
Well, and then, I mean, this relates to caching, but like record keeping was one of the major breakthroughs in that, right? And that's essentially a cached record of like, by the way, don't eat this. And we've got a list of poisonous foods in the region.
Yeah.
And now that people can write them down and read them, it saves everybody the time of rediscovering that or having to go to a meeting, with the town elders to learn about it.
Well, that's the thing that people usually pick up because it's local knowledge that's very important. That the record keeping was much more for keeping track of how many bales of grain were.
I was going to bring that up next. Yeah. Like, I mean, so it allowed you to just the idea of saving data.
Yeah.
Right. of having a way to, like, granted, you can save it sort of kind of in your head.
Mhm.
And you
Actually,
can
the pre-record keeping cultures were very good at oral history. Like,
I think
I've heard
very
that
good is a relative term.
I've forgot where I heard this, but
They were very much better than us.
yeah, I heard that they were very passed down very accurately.
I would be surprised to learn that even that they were good at like accounting.
Yeah,
Like they certainly had a much better memory than we do for like narrative stuff, but for things where like you need to keep a 4 or 5 digit number in your head, and then you need to do that like 200 times.
actually,
I'm not saying it's impossible, but I would need to see some really, really good evidence that would actually be the case.
There's people that can memorize how many digits of pi have people memorized. I'm gonna look that up real quick.
Oh yeah, no, it's crazy what you can
But
do.
actually, I don't need to look it up. We'll figure it out later. But the memorization techniques involved, I've like looked those up because it's really fascinating. It are building a narrative on top of it. Like, yeah, we as humans like use storytelling as a memorization technique because we're sort of built for it.
Yeah, the memory palace thing is very much you're walking through and you telling a story to yourself to remember things. Yeah, people can memorize an entire deck of cards in random order, what order each card comes in by doing those.
But those are like professional memorizers who can do a deck of cards in 5 minutes, right?
Anyone can do it with enough practice.
Right, yeah. But that's sort of...
Yeah, but I mean, if you haven't invented writing, then the marginal product of a professional memorizer will be much, much higher than it is after you invent writing.
Right.
So
but even the whole...
requiring it to be a professional memorizer is actually a fairly low bar for pre-literate civilizations.
It saves a lot of time. If I'm farming 18 hours a day, I don't have time to like dedicate training my mind palace. So like I might know somebody who's like the town accountant or makeshift thing, but then I need to just trust that they remember everything correctly, right? Yeah,
and I mean the thing is normally when I hear these stories about pre-literate cultures had an amazing oral tradition that was incredibly accurate and etc., it's from religious people trying to justify why their religious tradition is infallible and accurate. And
accurate doesn't mean true.
Yeah, but I don't believe that their narrative hasn't changed, because sometimes we do find old ancient records and they contradict. It's even if people can memorize those things, and I don't doubt that they can, there are other pressures in life, specifically political pressures often, which will cause the narrative to change over generations, even if people could have memorized it perfectly, because there's damn good reason for small things to be changed at the margins.
Yeah.
Especially like if your civilization gets taken over by the Babylonians and all of a sudden you need to reboot everything and explain how this happened.
Yeah.
All part of God.
Yes. It does become all part of God's plan. It's wonderful that way.
I remember as a child hearing that things are part of God's plan, and I was kind of like, I was thinking about that recently too. I was always very confused by why that made it good. Or interesting. It's like, don't worry, it's all part of God's plan. And then I'm like, what is the plan though? Because so far, all the history I've read seems very random and capricious and kind of cruel, which I guess is a synonym for capricious.
Yeah. I would strongly recommend, I know I've recommended Ted Chiang before because he's just an amazing short story writer. And he writes things that rationalists would love. But he wrote a short story called The Truth of Fact and the Truth of Feeling. And in that is a wonderful example of this sort of narrative that changes for political reasons. And when one particularly precocious young kid finds out that the history has changed and gets upset about it, the elders are like, kid, this is the actual truth, because this is the truth of the world as it is, because that's the truth they needed it to be in order for things to progress so that the tribe could survive. It was a really interesting story.
Yeah.
The Truth of Fact and the Truth of Feeling.
Okay, cool.
And so I continually see people who aspire to be critical, or who aspire to critical thinking, repeating back cached thoughts which were not invented by critical thinkers.
This is from the Post.
Yeah. And so I figured we could try a few of these, complete the pattern. And so death gives meaning to life, or and he gives all the examples that like would be easy for me to think of, like immortality is a good thing. And then you get ideas like, well, overpopulation, all these nonsense things. And I've met people like this, and I've actually rejoined. I don't probably after I've read these or around the time, but like.
You mean like people just defending their cash thought?
Yeah, we're like so they have the thought, and then because they have it, their inner PR person is like, well, hold on, that must be what I actually believe. Let's defend it. And so like, but I've met people, and like he talks about in the post, who are like, when you talk about existential risk or something, well, maybe humans suck.
You want to read the actual quote?
Oh, sure. I figure I could summarize it well enough, but it's frustrating to think that good and decent folk, people would never in 1,000 years spontaneously think of wiping out the human species, raising the topic of existential risk and hearing them say, well, maybe the human species doesn't deserve to survive. They would never in 1,000 years shoot their own child who is part of the human species, but the brain completes the pattern.
Yeah.
And so like I've had those conversations, and I ask them like, and they'll be sitting there with their spouse. I'm like, so you would shoot your partner in the face, like you would throw them into the sun or whatever it is, right? And they're like, well, no. And I'm like, where do you think they live?
What species are you, friend?
Yeah.
I've had that. Like, there was this ex-coworker of mine that was always talking about how humans suck. Just like, okay, but you're a
maybe it's not humans, maybe it's just you, man. I like Carl Sagan, just to go it from the other way. He had just this great way of talking and thinking about it. It's like, we humans are capable of greatness. I think that's the way to properly frame it. Like we fail all the time. We do nasty shit as a species, but we as a species are also capable of such greatness that the rest of the planet is not even comparable to. That's the real beauty.
Yeah. I will say that self-loathing is a hell of a drug. I was married to someone who was of the humans should be extinct mindset, and she didn't kill herself.
Yeah, I was going to say, was this a human that you were married to?
Yes, and she didn't kill herself, but, she was kind of trying to do the best she could for all the other species on the planet because she knew that she couldn't wipe out the human species, but it was one of those things where, like, if she had the option to, she probably would have.
I mean, maybe, but then you kind of wonder, like, I don't know about, this person's psychology in particular, but it's like, I think the people who just say that are just saying rehearsed thoughts. Like, I think you give them a button and be like, by the way, this will also kill your parents, your kids, your partners. Like, the person who pressed that button's a monster.
I don't want to use the word monster, but
anyone who's
certainly troubled.
Anyone who's willing to kill me and every baby on Earth.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to say that I would call them anything but a monster. I get where they're coming from in a way that, like, I get where
I admire the self-consistency.
I suppose.
Of being like, so I'd die too, but that's okay.
But I totally get where someone's coming from if they were to go, kill an abortion doctor or, I mean, hell, even like,
kill a Democrat.
Kill a Democrat or like lynch a witch or something, right? Like, I get where you're coming from. You believe these crazy things, but the idea that you're out doing this, like, I don't know. I think that's, maybe again, I won't fight the definition of monster, but I'm like, I want that to change. I don't want you to be that way anymore.
Stop being.
I think you would be happier if you weren't that way anymore, right?
It's a good thing that it's really hard to wipe out the human species.
Thank God.
And we have to worry about the mad genius correlate to what was the fuck? It just slipped my mind. The law that computing power doubles every 16 months.
Moore's law.
Yes, the mad genius corollary to Moore's
Where's
law.
That cash
is troubling.
thought?
Yeah, it's a great cash thought.
I like this one. Rationality, complete the pattern. Love isn't rational.
I mean, we could probably think of just like, corollary versions of that make us sound all high and mighty, right?
Well,
like, we're such clear thinkers.
Shall we complete the pattern? Love isn't rational.
Well, I thought that it was. Oh yeah. I mean,
he argues against it, but the first thing I think is like, that shit makes me crazy.
Yeah, I guess
it makes me do stupid stuff that I wish I didn't do.
I thought the love isn't rational was supposed to be somebody arguing against rationality as a good thing. Like.
Oh, that if you're rational, you can't love.
Yeah.
Motherfucker.
Or I encountered those arguments back in the day with religious people, like, oh no, I believe in love because I believe the universe has meaning, and it's like, well, I believe in love too, and I don't feel that way. So clearly, we're at an impasse with our communication here. I don't have like a quick cash thought to rejoin to somebody who's like, what that they say. So love isn't rational. Like, okay, so.
Yeah.
Like that's my cast response, I guess, if I have one. Like,
Well, then you're not a real rationalist, Stephen.
I guess, yeah, I'll bite that bullet. If that means that I think love is cool or real, or that what makes me not a rationalist? That I think those things, or that I don't have a quick response to the person who says that.
Yeah.
So what are you doing, David?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna take the other side of this. I think love is rational.
I know, it's, yeah,
Like,
that's what I was thinking.
what's irrational about love? Like, sometimes love makes you behave irrationally, but that's not because of love, it's because of the stupid monkey brains.
I think it's because of love, but I think love is a thing that evolved for rational reasons. Like, evolution wants you to act irrational sometimes in the defense of your mating partner.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
like-
I think love is a I think love is a comorbidity with irrationality, so to speak. But like, it's not inherently irrational.
Right. Like, so put it that way. I mean, like, the fact that I love my wife means that I share in her happiness, and I want her to be happy. And like, well, I mean, even if you just distill it down to her happiness makes me happy, like, then of course, I want her to be happy because it also makes me happy. There's nothing necessarily rational. That's a perfectly, as far as I'm concerned, straight line of thinking. I think, like, people might say it's irrational in that I would let 1,000 people die before I let her die, and yet the math doesn't check out, right?
Right.
So, it is what it is. Like, I'm prepared to just bite that, but I defend that that's like a kind of I like comorbid with irrationality. That's a kind of flaw in robot thinking that I think is understandable given our heritage, right? Like you said, we're wired this way, and it doesn't make sense that, like, if I cared about her as little as I care about third world people, who I care about, but like, just because they're distant both in time and space and psychology, like,
it's rational in game theoretic terms. Like, the impulse to exact revenge on someone who has hurt you in some way, even far beyond the costs that would rationally make sense, prevents people from hurting you in the first place, and therefore, even though it is irrational to pay a lot of money to hurt someone more than it's worth, it in the long run, it stops the hurt from happening in the first place.
I like that way of framing it.
It's mutually assured destruction on a personal level.
People are less inclined to mess with you if they know that you will throw away literally everything to ruin their life if they mess with you.
Yeah.
I will sell my house and hire hitmen left and right to come after you if you cut me off in traffic again.
All right, are we?
So what I'm hearing, Stephen, is that you think Taylor was right.
Taylor did nothing wrong.
I think
I actually haven't read it, so I'm just repeating a phrase that I see.
I about the nothing wrong part, like, I don't know, that's a longer conversation, but, like, was she right? Like, at the end, spoiler alert for Worm, she basically mind rapes everybody into following her will so she can so she can command all of them as, like, some of them as meat shields or as distractions, and others as just big guns to fight the big bad that's trying to destroy the universe. Like, I would be obviously irked if I was grabbed by Taylor and thrown into the meat cannon to be shot at this monster, and yet I'd be like, my last thoughts, if I had a chance to reflect on them, might be, I understand. Like, given the choice, I would like to have cooperated freely, but given that there wasn't time to do that and people weren't playing along, if you had to do it by force, like, I mean, it's one of those things, like, what's worse, like, being violated that way or having your planet be extinguished? Mm-hmm. And anyone who says my personal freedom is more important than that, they don't realize that if your planet's extinguished, your personal freedom is also gone.
Well, maybe they do realize that, and that's just the hill they're willing to die on, literally.
They're literally willing to die on that hill and drag the rest of their species with them, including their friends and children, right?
So that, too, would have made a great segue to the main topic if we didn't have another sequence post to get through.
Okay, let's finish this one up. He ends it with, try to keep your mind from completing the pattern in the standard, unsurprising, already known way. It may be that there is no better answer than the standard one, but you can't think about the answer until you can stop your brain from filling in the answer automatically.
I like how he says that like it's easy. He doesn't say it like it's easy.
He makes a very big point in the post about how hard it is. I just didn't copy it all.
But it's like, even the big way there's
It's
no
sort of like, don't think of a pink elephant.
well,
I've never had a problem with that.
I pictured a pink elephant the second you described it. But like it's more just like, all right, so here's a common failure pattern. Try not to do that. It's like, sure, I'll try.
Mhm.
Like, and granted, he goes on more at length about it. And this, like, obviously that's like a large point of the sequence is how to think originally. But to deliver that sentence is like delivering instructions on how to tightrope walk. It's like, yep, put one foot in front of the other, try not to fall.
Yeah.
Like that's the instructions. It's like, sure, it sounds easy when you write it down, but it's hard.
So I have a question about this before we move on to the next thing. Isn't this basically what all the conspiracy theory and flat earther people are doing? They're not just accepting the cash thoughts that society has given them?
I disagree. I think that they're accepting a new cash thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they have the cash thought. Everything you hear from official sources is a lie. And like that's definitely an interestingly different cash thought, but I still think it's a cash thought. Like I have, with the exception of some people like David Youssef, I haven't met anyone who's like, yeah, 9/11 probably was done by Al Qaeda, but Kennedy definitely not killed by what's his name? Oswald. Yes. Although I did recently hear by far the best alternative to Oswald killed Kennedy from David Youssef. So shout out to him. What?
Was it a suicide?
No, it was an accident. Basically, the according to Youssef, which I have not independently confirmed this, but I doubt he'd just make it up. The Secret Service and other law enforcement agencies weren't trained to keep their fingers off the triggers until several decades after the Kennedy assassination.
Till they accidentally killed the president.
Yeah. So the idea is, the first two shots are from Oswald. Secret Serviceman draws his pistol with a finger on the trigger. Driver slams on the brakes, and the Secret Serviceman accidentally shoots Kennedy in the back of the head.
I have two quick thoughts on that. One is that I feel like his head blew up in the fashion of a rifle shot, not a handgun.
And it exited out the back of his head.
That too. But the other thing about the back of the head makes you think that this theory suggests that, and it's not impossible, but that Kennedy died like Marvin in Pulp Fiction. They're leaning back. Hey man, what do you think about this?
Boom.
Speed bump. Oh shit, I just shot Marvin in the face.
The thing is, I'm more inclined
Spoilers
to
for
believe...
Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. I'm more inclined to believe, what's the... I'm trying to remember the phrase where it's like not attributing things to malice or...
Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity.
Yeah, so I'm totally inclined to believe a conspiracy theory that's like, okay, the official thing is wrong. Actually, this other stupid random thing happened, and I'm just like, yeah, sure.
They're trying to fly the planes to Cuba, but they hit the towers on accident.
Yeah, that's definitely the way to convince me of a conspiracy too. Just like if the Benny Hill theme is more appropriately played over the conspiracy theory than it is over the official story, I'm much more likely to believe it.
I think that your point of like conspiracy theories as a whole is interesting, but I think that's a larger phenomena than just rehearsing bad cash thoughts, because rehearsing the correct answer as cash thoughts is a similar problem. Again, you happen to be correct. How old's the universe?
About 14 billion years.
Yeah, and that's just like an answer that you heard and is vaguely right.
I have no idea how to verify that.
Right, and like I've read books that explain how we know that, but I didn't check.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much exactly how primary research is demanded to be fully justified in my belief, but it's like I'm right. I'd be willing to bet all my money that I'm right, that the universe is somewhere between 10 and 15 billion years old. But like. That's not the, I don't know, if I believed that it was 10,000 years old because I'm a young earth creationist, I'm still just rehearsing things that I've heard, know? Granted, I'm rehearsing better things that I've heard from better places because I'm smart and I'm right and they're wrong. But, but yeah.
I think it's a hard thing to do and an easy trap to fall into when you try to critically examine
when
something.
you try to think outside the
David,
box.
you have the loudest keyboard I think I've ever heard. You're welcome to mute if you need to.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I'm just letting you know you're welcome to mute if you need to slam the keyboard.
That was a great segue by Jace, though.
Sorry, I couldn't hear it over the keyboard.
Really trying.
No, segue again. I couldn't hear it over the keyboard. Sorry.
Oh, no, I don't want to do it again. I just wanted to
Okay.
let's play it again.
What was the segue?
By the way, if you guys have never typed on a mechanical keyboard, definitely try it. It is the most oddly.
Uh-oh.
Oh, we just lost you. All right, we are now recording. All right, the second less wrong post after that slight technical issue, which we have now recovered from, is the outside the box box, in which Eliezer points out that whenever someone extorts you to think outside the box, they usually, for your convenience, point out exactly where outside the box is located.
Isn't it funny how nonconformists all dress the same?
Yeah. ... If you don't wear black, how will people know you're a tortured artist? How will people recognize uniqueness if you don't fit the standard pattern for what uniqueness is supposed to look like?
I feel like he's painting with too broad a brush here.
I don't.
Like, I mean, I guess tortured artist might be a very niche thing, but like, you know, tortured person also has like I wear long drapey clothing and I'm you know, like, but a lot of people are tortured and sad and dress perfectly normally.
Yes, but they should not dress perfectly normally so other people can tell that they're tortured and sad.
Yeah.
That's why we have
Also, I feel like there's a difference between a tortured sad person, lowercase t, lowercase s, lowercase p, and a tortured capital T, sad, capital S, person, capital P, TM.
I've been goth my whole life. I never considered myself to be tortured or sad. I just like the aesthetic.
Yeah, I really love this
with you there.
But
I really...
Anyway.
Yeah.
In artificial intelligence, everyone outside the field has a cached result for a brilliant, new, revolutionary AI idea. Neural networks, which work just like the human brain. New AI idea, complete the pattern. Logical AIs, despite all the big promises, have failed to provide real intelligence for decades. What we need now are neural networks. I feel like there's probably a new one now.
Isn't GPT...
That was the thing at the time.
Isn't GPT and OpenAI basically neural network architectures? Yeah.
Whoops.
We got there eventually.
But are those AIs?
Yeah, it's a good one. I don't know.
Are they intelligent?
They're the next step along the way.
They're getting there. There's something.
So we think.
And as someone who is vaguely approximating a subject matter expert in something that has very little to do with AI, I can confirm that this isn't exclusive to AI. It happens for pretty much everything.
Yeah, I've heard. Gosh darn it. I'm trying to remember. I had a perfect example of one.
Well, the thinking outside the box on econ is always like, oh, people aren't perfect, utility maximizers. And that's why we have this brilliant revolutionary new behavioral economics, which has been around for like 30 years now.
It's actually been around for, 250 years or so.
See, that's how revolutionary it is.
Fun fact, literally 100% of modern economics can be found in Adam Smith, except for demand curves. That is literally the only innovation that's happened in economics in the last 250 years.
I will have to take your word for it.
Sounds like a really riveting field. If it's been a solved problem for a quarter of a millennia. Was that just a dig at your profession? I'm sorry.
Kinda.
I meant it in a good-natured way, but I realized that it could have come off. I meant it as a complete joke that was supposed to be a fun jab. But
yeah, no, that's how I took it.
Good. Yeah, you're looking for the cool new shit that hasn't been found yet.
Yeah, basically, so there's demand curves, and then there's a lot of people trying and failing to refute Smith's claims, and then basically there's just a bunch of footnotes to Adam Smith.
Well, there's also implementation, right?
He was pretty good about that.
Oh, well then.
Yeah, he actually married theory and practice in a much better, healthier way than a lot of modern economists.
I do like that Eliezer points out subversive literature because, literature is a thing that I have a hard-on for, and asks that it's has any of the subversive literature you've read caused you to modify any of your political beliefs? Points out that most of it is taught to you by English teachers in high school. And in my opinion, anything that's actually subversive is censored. So nowadays the subversive stuff would be I guess what you find on 4chan.
Yeah,
Apparently,
Or
I
QAnon.
Or QAnon.
Captain Underpants.
No.
Captain Underpants is like the most banned book
What?
because parents don't like that it's very naughty.
Oh, wow. Okay.
When I worked at a library, we had banned books day. It was great.
nice.
Like we display them prominently with like little placards explaining why this book was banned, and encouraging people to check it out and read it.
So I'm gonna ask this question, even though I'm almost sure I know the answer. Did you ever put Mein Kampf in that display?
Yes.
Was
Really?
Mein Kampf ever banned?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
It's currently banned in Germany, I think.
Yeah, Germany's got its whole thing. I figured kind of over here. Like,
Got
can't I
its
go to
thing.
Amazon and buy a copy of Mein Kampf?
Yeah.
Well, here you can, yeah.
I,
You can buy anything that's been banned in America.
Well, except for the Dr. Seuss books.
Well, you can still buy those.
Well, not on Amazon or eBay.
Oh, yeah. But
Yeah.
that's because of their stupid bullshit.
Right. So, I mean, if they're still selling Mein Kampf, like that's my thing. I guess in my mind, it's not, I guess who banned it? Like,
Schools.
okay, yeah.
Or primarily schools.
God, I'm waiting for-
libraries. I mean, like they have tried and succeeded at banning books from libraries before, but libraries like generally dislike that and have tried to keep open access to information for everyone.
Are all the good, important historical books that are racy banned now, like Huck Finn and To Kill a Mockingbird and stuff?
I don't think they're.
I can't remember the exact details, but I'm pretty sure that either middle school or high school teacher got canceled because they said the N-word because they were reading Huck Finn aloud.
I heard about that.
Yeah.
But I wonder, I mean,
Also,
and
Jace,
that was also 10 years ago. It was like an old recording, right?
Maybe. I don't know. Jace, is that library still open? Because I feel like I need to donate to them.
Oh, yeah. Guess I don't know. For some reason, I feel weird saying it on the air. It's the Otto Bruins Public Library of Northfield.
Okay, cool.
Definitely donate to them. They're great. That was the same one where we had the hijab day.
Oh, nice.
The stupid controversy over that.
Was that where you encourage people to wear hijabs if they wanted to, or?
Well, we had a local author come in who was a Black Muslim who wrote a book about her life story of being a Black Muslim in Atlantic City, and we got to talking with her after she did her book presentation and realized that it was National Hijab Day coming up, and we're like, oh cool, we can have you come back, because she wanted to it was a great time. She wanted to come back and do more stuff. Just I'll talk to I have a friend who owns a store that sells hijab, and they can come in. We'll talk about the different styles that they wear in different countries, and then people could try them on. And to advertise it, the library director posted a picture of herself on social media wearing one of the hijab that she'd been given by this woman who makes them, and was come to the library for Hijab Day. We have these books about these Muslim women and their experiences, etc., etc. And the internet blew up because it was white lady in a hijab of cultural appropriation, and then one side, and then the other side was, how dare you wear that terrorist garb in our nice little library. So
Well, it got the attention it wanted.
So while we're swapping fun library stories, do you guys remember that story about the library that was trying to do a drag queen story hour, and it was so emphatically protested that they ended up canceling it?
Oh, I didn't realize they canceled it.
Yeah, they did. And that is the library that I go to when I want to go to a good library.
Oh, cool.
Not really. Would have been a lot cooler if they hadn't caved.
Oh, but, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I mean, they get some points for trying, but yeah.
So back to thinking outside the box.
Those were thinking outside the box ideas. I like it.
What else do we have to say about this?
Eliezer has a cool example. Apparently, at this startup funding place, Draper Fisher Jerviston, if only two partners need to agree in order to fund any startup up to 1.5 million. And if all the partners agree that something sounds like a good idea, they won't do it. Because that's
not thinking outside the box enough.
Exactly.
I love that idea so much.
Yeah.
Did it say how many partners there were?
Also, real quick, you did skip the best part of this post, or at least the most topical. which is the block quote from Lizard.
Yeah.
Revolution has already been televised. Revolution has been merchandised. Revolution is a commodity, a packaged lifestyle available at your local mall. 1995 gets you the black mask, the spray can, the crush the fascist protest sign, and access to your blog where you can write about the police brutality you suffered when you chained yourself to a fire hydrant. Capitalism has learned how to sell anti-capitalism.
Good job.
Yeah.
And I could do an entire podcast episode on this concept alone, but for now, I'll just leave it at I once saw a t-shirt with a chibi version of the famous photo of Che Guevara. And that was the most late capitalism ass thing I have ever seen in my life.
I kind of want that t-shirt. Oh, and who's Lizard?
I assumed some poster on whatever this blog or whatever it is.
Here to observes, and it links to journalism.berkeley.edu, and it's just like the main page. And
Yeah.
does anyone know who Lizard is? Help us, listeners.
Yes.
It's gone on the ground because now the lizard people don't rule us overtly. All right, he ends it with, every improvement is a change, but not every change is an improvement. The one who says, I want to build an original mousetrap, and not, I want to build an optimal mousetrap, nearly always wishes to be perceived as original. Originality in this sense is inherently social because it can only be determined by comparison to other people. And that actually was not the end, but that is the last note I pulled, and is another example of how hard it can be to actually be thinking outside of the actual box, not using cached thoughts, because then if you're just trying to optimize looking original, you're not necessarily looking for the actual correct, best solution.
Yeah, and especially in a place where, like, if it's a job, like, hey, I did this thing, and it's an original me, and I'm the one who put it together. Like, that gives you job security and, like, street cred among your coworkers and bosses, right?
Mm-hmm.
The downside is that, like, sure, you did it originally, but the packaged version that you can get for free does that better and cleaner and more maintainably.
Mm-hmm.
Why
did you spend 200 hours on this?
Right, and now it's this convoluted mess that only you know how to work with.
Job security.
Yeah, then the downside is then when you leave, it's other people's mess to work with. So, I don't know if I ever hear people say I want to build an original mousetrap. I get what point he's making, but I always see I want to build a better mousetrap, which is the canned phrase, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have heard things like you're trying to build a new mousetrap or
reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
Yes. Reinvent the wheel is something that I mention at least once every 2 weeks at my job. Like, hey, before you do this, make sure you're not just trying to reinvent the wheel. Like, there's probably a way that already exists to do this to solve this problem. And lo and behold, there always is, because there's no problem in general that you're facing working with computers that someone else already hasn't worked on.
If you could reinvent the wheel and patent the reinvention and then convince everyone else to give up the old wheels, highly lucrative.
Hard to do on a computer, but it would be nice to do in some other way, right?
Very easy to do in pharmacology, apparently.
Right.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Don't get me started. Fucking big pharma.
So for next time, we will be reading Original Seeing and How to Seem and Be Deep.
Can't wait.
All right. And now we are going to start grilling David on why libertarianism is the best and or the worst.
Yes.
All right. This is
insert the audio from The Dark Knight of the Joker saying, "Come on, hit me."
We're going to try to keep this more of a Q&A thing. If any of David's A's go for more than 3 minutes, then we start tapping on the microphone, doing something to get his attention. So try to keep it snappy because we're going to have lots of follow-ups, right?
I did not realize that was the rule, but I'll do my best.
I didn't either.
I'll say a soft, limit. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I guess if I ask a good question and the answer takes 30 minutes, then just say, here's the crappy short answer. The longer answer takes 30 minutes or something. But
yeah, if you want to hit me with follow-ups, I'll elaborate.
So I had a meta note to bring up to this. And at the beginning of the last episode, we caveated that, okay, look, hit Stephen or anyone who commits this fallacy or thought trap gets a bonk with a bonk stick. If you're comparing ideal capitalism and saying, well, this would be better than this proposed libertarian solution, you get the bonk.
No, ideal government versus practical.
Yeah, I mean, it is a symmetrical rule, but I very rarely see people making the other mistake, and I'm pretty sure I don't. But yes, if you're comparing ideal stuff to real stuff, then you're doing it wrong.
Well, so I think that's just what I wanted to keep in mind for a lot of my questions, because, like, you know, we had like a long back and forth about, you know, well, what if this asshole wants to do donuts in the intersection near your house, and you don't want them to because it's keeping you up at night? Like, I feel like the answer of, well, they just go door to door and offer them money in exchange for use of that thing. Like, that is not how the real world works or will ever work, right. I maintain. And so, like, I think that's the reverse of that fallacy, where it's like, well, sure, in this perfect libertarian utopia of Homo economicus then of course that's exactly how it would work.
So people have paid people to do pretty weird stuff on Fiverr?
Yes.
But that's different. You're on Fiverr.
I guess.
So,
right?
Yeah, so the answer I gave you was shortened for the sake of time. Someone actually asked about that on the subreddit, so I asked them whether they wanted me to respond on the Reddit or on this podcast, and they said on the Reddit. I have not gotten around to that yet, but I will try to do that shortly after we stop recording, assuming I still have any neurons left, and then we can put a link to that in the show notes, and then we can continue the discussion on that specific topic there. Does that sound like a plan?
Perfect.
Sounds good to me.
Just one last thing about that before we move on. I will remind you that the governmental outcome was a couple of people got run over and maimed. So you don't, like, even if the outcome you get under real capitalism is just like a bunch of people get really, really annoyed and get a bad night's sleep, that's still probably better.
Right, and I laughed not because that's funny. I laughed because it's a great example, right? Minus the actual human suffering, it's hilarious. And so, like, you're right. Like, hey, you realize what really happened was people got, you know, run over by cars, right? I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a compelling counter argument. But I guess what I want to keep in mind is that, like, proposing a system that's better than what we have now is so easy, anyone can do it. You know, more or less.
You're not wrong.
No one should be billionaires.
Right. No one should be billionaires. No one, should, whatever, insert problem, right? But, like, so I guess what I wonder...
I also think David is really downplaying the badness of having a lot of people kept up all night, especially if it keeps happening over and over. Like,
as someone with insomnia, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. So like, I have had some involuntary staying up all nights myself. I don't think I'm downplaying it, though, because a guy got his legs crushed.
That is worse.
No, that's definitely worse. I agree with you. But on the other hand, if my past year of being almost unable to live my life due to inability to sleep was due to one guy, I might consider crushing his legs to get that year back.
Well, and we can also move away from this specific example. Most of the time that someone makes a huge ruckus in a neighborhood, nothing happens to them. Right? People drive through my townhome complex parking lot once a week, blaring music loud enough to shake the windows for everybody in the complex.
There's this asshole who lives across from my apartment who has a DJ quality speaker.
I think you told this story last episode.
I probably did say this last time because I think it happened right before that.
And so, like, I'm just saying, like, for the most part, you know, violating the rules that people would like you to follow has no consequences. Like,
unfortunately.
You know, well, I mean, yeah. Granted, we don't want the consequences to be you get run over, but it would sure be nice if you got a ticket. All right, so I've got a question that probably sounds like it'd be fast to ask but too long to answer. How in general, how would, like, not just norms, but, like, agreed upon systems, like what we call laws, how would that work without like a state police?
So are we talking libertarianism here, or are we talking anarcho-capitalism? Because I can talk both, but one can easily be a libertarian without being an anarcho-capitalist. So we should keep the distinction in mind.
Yeah, that was going to be my first question, because a lot of the things you brought up seem to be like the subscription model of government, which is great, but that seems like anarcho-capitalism as opposed to like what the Libertarian Party actually wants when they run people for president.
I'm more interested in hearing about anarcho-capitalism.
I say we hear both.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah, if we have time, we could do both for sure.
If
try to keep it libertarian.
if you're gonna force them into 3-minute answers, I bet we can do 6, because I'm curious how both of these work. So
Yeah. All right. So the short version is, or the standard moderate libertarian version is definitely the short version. So I'll start with that. It would work exactly the same as it works now, just there would be fewer laws about stupid things like nonviolent drug offenses, prostitution, trying to think of other examples that would be pretty much uncontroversial for libertarians.
licenses to do people's hair.
Yep. Occupational
50 years ago,
licensing.
50 years ago, having homosexual sex.
Yeah. Ending the forever wars.
And I think this is why libertarianism is somewhat popular, whereas anarcho-capitalism is a total fringe position, because just being like, we're not changing much, we're just getting rid of the stupid stuff is more palatable than we're getting rid of all government and replacing it with this weird thing no one's tried before.
Yes, that's true. But also libertarianism, even the moderate version, is pretty unpopular because a lot of people are just horrific busybodies and would prefer to be able to boss other people around at cost of being bossed around themselves than they would to just like let people alone. And that's why vice crimes exist.
So in a libertarian framework, I still have a state number I can call the police and say, this person won't stop hitting my car with a baseball bat, and somebody shows up and stops them, right?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I mean,
you could even potentially call them up and say, this person is blaring music and there's a noise ordinance in this town.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what, so libertarianism, the standard framework has taxes then, just less, right?
I mean, not necessarily even less. Probably less, but like I said, fiscal stuff is, I don't think, really worth quibbling about. So if you wanted to, say, end the forever wars and the drug wars and so on, and then pump that money into a UBI, that would still be pretty libertarian. There are probably some libertarians who would disagree with that, but I would consider that a win for libertarianism.
Right on. So I guess libertarianism in a nutshell then was like less about completely removing government, more just about like really reining it in the way a lot of people pretend like they want to. Is that right?
Yeah. So like even the really isn't necessarily something you'd need to commit to be a libertarian. Like I'm very much in the libertarian unity camp. So like if there are any decreases at all that you want to make to the size, scope, and spending of government, then like I will back you up on that. So like, yeah, I am very much not a purist. I think that there should be as wide a tent as we can possibly make for who counts as a libertarian. So yeah, if you want to make it,
you want it to become a dominant, successful position.
Exactly.
The people who gatekeep as many high walls as they can are the ones who want to make their position fringe and small, and therefore never victorious.
You're not wrong.
All right, I got my question answered. Unless we want to ask about, I'm less curious now about the anarcho-capitalism way of doing it. Is that just, I guess, so, all right, briefly then, we'll keep the rest of this on libertarianism, at least for my stuff, but the anarcho-capitalist society, someone's hitting my car with a bat, I'm not big enough to go hit them with a bat and stop them myself, nor do I have enough money to pay a security guard to do it. What's my option?
So essentially you've posited you don't have enough money to pay a security guard, which I think due to economies of scale, it would be quite cheap in anarcho-capitalism because that's actually the solution. Essentially, you would subscribe to a rights enforcement agency,
Shorthand, the mob.
Yeah.
So the original phrase that David Friedman used in The Machinery of Freedom was private protection agencies, and he changed it to rights enforcement agencies because literally everyone who heard that immediately thought protection racket. But yeah, so you will subscribe to a rights enforcement agency, and then whenever you have a complaint that you want to bring to them, then you say, hey, XYZ is happening, and then they will go to the rights enforcement agency of the person who's doing it, and he's saying, hey, this person's doing a thing that's violating someone's rights. We're going to go find them, jail them, whatever. I do have an idea for how exactly that would work, but it's getting a little bit into the weeds. So we can go into that if you want, but I'll wait for you guys to actually ask instead of volunteering. And then they show up at your house and say, hey, quit it. And then, if necessary, bonk you, take some of your money, put you in jail, whatever.
Right on. I like that succinct answer.
That's a terrible answer, though, because that is literally the mob. He would just have his own rights enforcement agency, which would fight your rights enforcement agency.
I mean, I didn't say I agreed with it. I like the I like the succinctness of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
there is a good reason to believe that wouldn't happen. Do you want to give me another 3 minutes to talk about that?
Please do.
Okay, cool. So essentially, if two rights enforcement agencies have a conflict, one says that their guy did a thing, the other guy says they didn't, then they will go to a mutually agreeable arbitrator. For the arbitrator to be mutually agreeable, then they'll need to be like an impartial seeker of truth. And then and that is actually something that's borne out empirically. There was a time in the, I want to say, late 1700s in England, when there used to be one court, just the King's Court, and then due to some legal shenanigans, people were able to sue and try criminal cases, I think, but they were definitely able to sue in either the King's Court or in the Admiralty courts, and the levels of corruption plummeted because the courts were paid based on how many cases they heard, and so they actually did compete on non-corruption. Anyway, and then if the arbitrator finds the person did actually do the thing, and the rights enforcement agency keeps on trying to defend them, then they are going to fall into a moral hazard problem, where suddenly everyone who does bad things is going to be trying to join their agency. And that means that soon they will have basically every other agency massed against them. So unless this one agency with the criminals is small enough, or is big enough rather, that they can go against literally the rest of society, then they probably won't be able to get away with it. And there are reasons to believe that they won't be that big. But I'm going to need you to authorize another 3 minutes for me if that's if you want me to go into that.
I think I see what you're saying. I mean, it seems like this has the assumption that both parties have a rights protection agency memberships.
Yes.
Where, like, if I was operating outside the law as a Old West gunman, and I didn't have a rights arbitration or rights protection agency subscription myself, but I still wanted to shoot car windows out for the sport of it. And then the person whose car window I shot out calls I'm going to say cops. They call their cops, and then I don't have cops of my own, so then they basically just de facto win.
Yeah.
Unless you can stop the cops, which you probably can't. So
Yes.
All right.
So the objection that Charlie had upon hearing this is that this basically sounds like government for rich people. That anyone who can't afford a rights protection agency simply doesn't have rights that are protected. And there's a lot of people in America who don't have a lot of money.
Yeah, but current government is government for rich people. So anarcho-capitalism doesn't clearly perform worse there because, cops murder poor brown people all the time and get away with it.
There's issues, but like even when I was, working part-time making $11K a year, I could call the police.
Yeah. The police, they're certainly much more valuable for rich people, but there is some presence in poor people's lives that they can show up. If you get murdered and you're poor, the cops are still going to look into it. Usually.
Yeah, unless you get murdered by a cop.
Sure.
Yeah, so I suspect, although I freely admit that this is fairly self-serving speculation, but I suspect that the rights enforcement agencies would be cheap enough that basically anyone who is gainfully employed would be able to buy at least basic rights enforcement services.
Yeah, but not everyone is gainfully employed.
There might be philanthropic endeavors to.
Yeah, and for the rest, I think there will be that charity will be able to cover it because there are negative externalities to crime. This is the basic theory behind broken windows policing, which of course has a bad reputation because racism and qualified immunity. But if there are a bunch of murders or muggings or whatever, then to some extent those criminals are gaining skills that they'll be able to use to conduct or to commit those crimes more skillfully. So I suspect that there will be sufficient incentives to prevent those negative externalities that there will be some sort of free package. There are also potentially a lot of opportunities for in-kind payment of subscription fees. So one weekend a month and 1 week a year, go out and be a meter maid or something. That is getting deep into speculation territory because there's so much we don't know about what the services would cost and what sort of charity there would be and all that. But I will say it's not obviously something that will go horribly wrong. And I am a very, very pragmatic sort of anarcho-capitalist. I would like to see it tried, but if something that I think would work out is tried and it ends up going horribly wrong, then I'm happy abandoning the label. I'd be a little bit bummed, but I definitely consider human welfare more important than anarcho-capitalism. And so if it did end up having really bad consequences, like rights enforcement being beyond the ability of many people to pay for, then yeah, I'm okay saying it was a good shot, but it didn't work out.
Nice. I think I broadly like that answer. One part that I liked too was that you're right. Even if I was a mostly self-interested, well-off person, if I knew that two neighborhoods over, there's a guy robbing the houses of people too poor to afford protection, I don't want that person to get really good at crime because I'm just up the street. And if they get a lot of practice breaking into houses, next thing I know, they could be breaking into my house. Now, granted, if I'm sufficiently well off, I have gates and panic rooms or whatever. But if I'm only medium well off, I could see my personal selfish incentive being, you know what, I'll spend $10 a month towards the public pool for protection, whatever, right?
Well, I think that's why a lot of people moved out to the suburbs back when the whole white flight thing happened. because they could pay more to live further away from the crime, and that just left those crime-ridden areas crime-ridden.
Crimier.
Yeah.
Yeah, but remember that they did have government police, and one of the functions of government police is preventing private police. So even if we just assume that they were that they were rationally concerned about crime and there wasn't any racial motivations, which obviously there were, then under anarcho-capitalism, instead of running away, you could just say to your rights enforcement agency, hey, something's happening that I don't like. Here's some more money. Can you handle it?
Yeah, I don't like this idea specifically because it does remove the monopoly on violence. I think having a government monopoly on violence in any given territory is actually a really good idea, because I just don't like the idea of, I don't even know how many separate entities, basically everyone being able to commit violence at any time, and there's no rule against it just because they say they're a rights enforcement agency, or that, I'm a solo person. I am my own rights enforcement agency, and I don't like violence getting out of control where everyone feeling they have to defend everything themselves. I like the fact that there's people saying, no, only these specific people can do violence and everyone else has to cut it out.
But I think that our society kind of can work on that, like on an imaginable small scale, where, like, if we're off doing a 30-person camping trip for a month or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one guy keeps stealing food. I don't know, or maybe the situation is more dire or something, right? But like whatever it is, like if at some point we don't have to call the cops to exercise enough force to make this stop, right?
Yeah, but that's because there's 30 of you. It's like when you're in a city of 1 million people, that's much harder to police.
Well, if there's one jerk running around shooting out car windows, then the 1 million people shouldn't have a problem stopping him either, right? But maybe the problem then too would be like, certainly if there's 1 million people and 300,000 of them are hated by the other 700,000 for bad reasons, then the 700,000 will have no trouble kicking their asses because they're outnumbered 2-1. It would be nice if only the state was allowed to do it, and the state was ideally close to impartial. I see what you're saying, yeah. I'm basically imagining like a race situation, where white people are beating black people out of the neighborhoods or something.
Yeah, so the issue there is just that, it's the standard argument that anarcho-capitalism doesn't obviously perform worse than other governments, because if you have a democracy with 50% people wanting to run around lynching black people, then they can. In fact, we had something vaguely like that in the antebellum South. Or if we have a constitutional republic which requires a supermajority to lynch black people, then we can. And under anarcho-capitalism, presumably the black people want to get lynched or want to avoid being lynched more than the white people want to lynch them. And so basically if there are enough black people with enough money and enough desire to live to basically outbid the white people, then they won't get lynched. And whether that ratio is higher or lower than it would need to be under the current system for whether the ratio of black people and weighted by their desire is higher than it is under the current system based on political power and how much the police like you and so on. I don't know. I could speculate, but that speculation would be obviously self-serving. And so I will say anarcho-capitalism doesn't obviously lose there, but that is a definite failure mode I would be worried about.
Still sounds like government for the rich, since the people with more money get to decide.
So, to some extent, you're right, except what you're forgetting is that lots of poor people can outbid a small number of rich people. In fact, that is basically how tenements happened. apartments in New York City used to be like you would rent the entire building or an entire floor or whatever. And then landlords realized that they could cut every floor up into 5, 6 apartments and then charge a third as much and make more money by renting out these relatively cheap small units rather than renting out entire floors to the rich.
I realize that, but 300,000 poor minority people aren't going to be able to outbid 700,000 middle-class majority people. And
sure, but how much do those middle-class majority people really want to go lynching?
I don't know.
Like when you are living in essentially a racist aristocracy and you know you'll get away from it, like the cost of lynching is fairly low for the lynchers. You just need to find someone and then throw a rope over a tree branch. If they actually had to like engage in a bidding war, I realize this is fairly self-serving, but I suspect they'd quickly realize, there are other ways we can entertain ourselves.
It wasn't just entertainment, though. Like, the antebellum South was a government-supported terrorism, basically. Like, you didn't need to lynch all that many people to have a terror-based community that kept the majority of the people you wanted to keep down. You only need to lynch a few to set an example.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's definitely true. I'm not sure I have much else to say here.
Yeah.
It's definitely a potential problem. It's just not obviously something that would go wrong.
I do like the idea that maybe it could be tried out in a small area first and then abandoned if it does go wrong.
Yes.
I'm
a big fan of charter cities for that exact reason.
Yeah, it would be an opt-in kind of thing. We wouldn't just make a neighborhood that way.
Yes.
Okay, Jace, did you have something?
Well, I don't know if you know this, but speaking of trying it out, I'm looking at the Anarcho Capitalism Wikipedia, and they have a section, historical precedents. So
yes.
Okay.
One of my favorite topics.
Yeah, I don't know which one I want to ask about more. The free cities of medieval Europe, medieval Iceland, the American Old West, Gaelic Ireland, or Somalia from 1991 to 2006. But which one is...
Oh, did the Plains Indians not make the cut? The Plains Indians are my favorite.
They're not on here. Huh. Do you want to edit this Wikipedia?
I have a lot of other stuff on my plate.
Yeah.
But maybe? The reason why I like the Plains Indians is because they are a practical solution to the hard problem. The hard problem, of course, being national defense. And the Plains Indian solutions was just be fucking insane and super aggressive and be so hostile to other foreign powers that they can't invade you because they're too busy being invaded by you.
I don't like that solution at all.
Yeah, it's not great, but it is a solution.
I suppose. Okay.
No one has any other libertarian questions? I mean, I can pull more off the top of my head, but
I guess like the problem is I'm already inclined towards libertarianism, and I want to fight the anarcho-capitalism thing, but this wasn't supposed to be an anarcho-capitalism episode. It was supposed to be a libertarianism one.
Yeah, the libertarianism thesis seems to have fewer holes to drive a plane through. So I like the answer to how do you solve commons problems? Well, you have laws about it. Like if that's an acceptable solution, then there's not much else about it, right?
I guess like a common complaint about libertarianism is it would be entirely fine in a libertarian government for a racist employer to discriminate against either racist employees or not racist, against minority employees or minority customers. And people don't like that.
We can talk about that.
What if I go to a doctor and the doctor says, "Fuck you, I'm not giving you any medicine. You're too white for me."
Say, all right, fine. If my money's no good here, then I'll take it somewhere else.
I think that's
so this is actually a problem where competition is, especially in the presence of a rule of law, where you won't need to worry about the KKK burning your shop down if you serve black people. This is actually an arena where competition works really, really well. Essentially, black people have money, and other minorities also have money. And if you are, if you discriminate against them, then you are foregoing profit. And under the theory of perfect competition, which of course is a homework land thing, but it's easier to see there. If you forego profit, then you go out of business. And likewise, if you discriminate against potential employees, then that's the same thing as essentially artificially restricting your supply of labor. And when there's a restricted supply of something, then the price for it rises. So
assholes can still pay extra to shop at the whites only cake shop, but like the all inclusive cake shop will just see more traffic because A, it's cheaper, and B, people who are incentive who don't like the whites only cake shop because they're assholes will shop at the all inclusive cake shop.
Yes, except that both cake shops also have to pay rent, and if the all inclusive cake shop does more business because of their lower cost of operation, then that will drive up rent to the point where the racist cake shop can't make theirs, and the all-inclusive cake shop can buy the lot and then expand their business.
Well, if the
all-inclusive, like, there's some questionable assumptions baked in there, but that's at least a decent first brush.
Were you grinning because baked into the cake?
No, I hate puns. If the all-inclusive cake shop, though, is willing to hire from a much wider labor pool and therefore get pay lower prices for labor, what that means in practice is that the public sees the all-inclusive cake shop hiring minorities for less, and then they get canceled for not paying their minority workers as much as the racist cake shop is paying the white employees.
I would hope that the good PR of "we serve everybody" would help cancel out the lower wages, but
I don't know.
That sounds like that doesn't sound like a critique of anyone. Like, that sounds more like a critique of society post 2013 than it does of like any of the politics at large. But that is a funny thing to consider there.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. At a certain point, I just have to throw out my hands and say, like, if people are determined to be psychotic, then there's not much I can do to stop them.
I guess I bring this up because this was an issue around, I don't remember if it was World War I or II, but probably World War I, I guess, where U.S. veterans, black U.S. veterans, were stationed in the South or on leave in the South, and there were no shops in whatever area that would serve them. And this became a major issue because these people were out there killing and dying to defend your, right to exist in America, and you will not serve them. And there was tension. But on the other hand, the law was on their side. They could simply choose not to serve black people. And since there were almost no black people or no black people that had money in their area, they never went out of business for this. And it was a thing that was part of their business model and worked. What do you do when you have a large federal government with a diverse population, and sometimes part of that population goes to places that still have these sorts of racist customs?
So I would hazard a guess, and this is speculation, but I'm reasonably confident about it, that the shop owners were less unwilling to serve the black people because just they didn't want their money, and more because they were worried about the KKK burning their shop down if they did.
General social pressure, yeah.
Yeah. The theory does fail if enough customers have a taste for not shopping with black people or not being served by black people, that it becomes more profitable to discriminate. But again, that's just a matter of like, if you are dealing with a population that's so corrupt, then it's more a matter of libertarianism being unable to save you rather than libertarianism failing in a unique way.
It sounds like libertarianism requires like a base level of not insanity to work, which doesn't sound on its face like too tall of an ask.
Well,
that is true, but it's also true of literally every other system.
That's true, yeah. I mean, so yeah, don't get me wrong, a lot of people suck, but like, and I'm not sure how often this happens where, a gay couple wants a cake for their wedding and I used to hear about these where the cake shop would be like, I don't want to make a cake for your gay wedding. And they're like, and if there isn't a cake shop next door where they're like, all right, cool, we'll give our money to someone else. Like, I don't know. And I think the cake example is fun, A, because it's real examples, but B, because it's kind of trivial. Like, you don't need a cake for your wedding. Yeah. And like, at the end of the day, it does not take a skilled person to make a cake. Like, you can get a cake at Safeway for $2.
Okay. So, yeah, all right.
Yeah, I mean, like,
it depends on the quality of cake you want.
Well, I mean, yeah, but at the end of the day, if you want to serve cake at your wedding, for $10, you can buy 5 boxes of cake, add an egg, and put it in the oven, and you're set, right? Like, or add an egg and some water, and like, so I think with those, I always like those examples of like the idiot shop owner turning down money because it's like, great, you just lost, because you get to overcharge like crazy for your cake, right? Like, if you're selling a wedding cake, so I mean, you just turned down potentially hundreds of dollars because you're stupid. Like, great, you're now out hundreds of dollars. There was an Aziz Ansari joke about this several years ago, and I forget if it was a real racist locksmith or a hypothetical one that he made up for the joke. But it's like the locksmith didn't like Koreans or something, or he thought they were always locking their keys out and didn't want to help them or something. And then he's like,
really specific.
Yeah, and he's like, he's like, I imagine this guy down the road, like, God, if I didn't hate Koreans so much, I would have made so much more money. And it's like, yeah. And the locksmith, who was happy to help Koreans, assuming that in this hypothetical, Koreans are more likely to lose their keys or something, or this is a Korean heavy area, like, they're going to do better. Like, to me, I like that part of the competition aspect, right? Like, I get where, like, Eneasz was giving the example of like a society collectively sucks enough to where it makes it hard for certain groups of people. That's a much harder problem. But like today, I mean, we ordered our wedding cake online for $50, right? Mm-hmm. So like, if I lived in some shithole town that, had one cake shop full of racists, I'll order mine from Milk Bar. Might have been Milk. I forget what it was. Milk is in the name somewhere. This person had a thing on Netflix that we watched.
It certainly wasn't Milk Bar in Denver, because that's a goth club.
That's right. But no, she works in New York, and we ordered from her shop, and it was awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. And so, like, I mean, so in the age, especially where you can order in services like that from trucks across the country, like, I guess the cake problem, as far as I'm concerned, is solved. Like, the where do you live and where do you shop for groceries if your local grocer hates black people or something, that's a bigger problem.
Yeah. So that is another place where the theory fails. If there's a discriminatory monopolist, then that can be a much stickier wicket. But the question there is, are you more likely to have a monopolist in a libertarian society or in a statist one? And I think the answer there is fairly clear, that you're more likely to have one in a statist society, just because so many monopolies are government made, and and like trust busting is basically just blatant rent seeking to punish companies that refuse to essentially issue bribes to the government, rather than actually, like, trying to find cases of price hikes, discrimination, or other serious issues nowadays. So, having a discriminating monopolist is definitely a harder problem to solve, but I think in a lot of ways you can solve that problem by just not having as powerful a government so that it has more limited scope to create monopolies.
All right, I have a follow-up I'm going to jump in here with. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, all right. For a lot of people, government intervention in the markets is a feature and not a bug. Like, they want the price protections, they want the licensing, they want the minimum wages, they want all these things that say, no, you can't build a kind of crappy house. You have to have at least these minimum standards. How the hell are you ever going to get people on board with libertarianism when you're telling them you're going to have to get rid of, various workplace safety laws and minimum wage laws and all these industry protections and tariffs and monopolies that make things so profitable for you? Like, this seems like a really hard ask.
What's fun, before you answer that, is that I'm exactly on the fence there, because I'm in the position where I like all of those things, and I'm finding this libertarian talk very seductive. So, like, I don't... Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so PR's not my department. Libertarianism is very unpopular, and that does make me sad, but, like, I'm pretty sure that's just the case because a lot of people are idiots and or busybodies.
You can't just go around and say people are idiots, though. You have to say something
watch
like...
me.
Well, okay, yeah. I'm sorry, I take that back. If you want to get a majority of the people voting, you have to make some sort of case as to why their lives would be better. And that's really hard to do because they can see how the licensing keeps out competition.
Yeah, so taking this more seriously, one of the reasons I think libertarians are unpopular is because it's really easy to see benefits that the government does. It's much harder to conceptualize the problems it creates. So, like, take the medicine approval by the FDA. So it's really easy to think, oh, sometimes drugs have dangerous side effects. We should keep people from being able to sell those. It's much harder to wrap your mind around the notion that some drugs are safe and that the FDA prevents them from being sold, and that also causes human suffering. Or to take workplace safety, it's really easy to look at the OSHA rules and see, oh, there are all these things that my boss isn't allowed to do that would make me safer, or that would make my job more dangerous. But what you don't see is that those things cost your boss money. They also make more people willing to do your job. So you have both a lower demand and a higher supply, and both of those things reduce your wages. And maybe if you were to offer those people explicitly package A, where you have these safety features, but they get paid, I don't know, $20 an hour, versus package B, where they don't have the safety features, but they would be paid $35 an hour, they would prefer more money. And that's just
building with
essentially,
no fire protections.
Yeah, and essentially by having these OSHA rules, you are telling people that they aren't allowed to trade money for safety in a way that they might not necessarily want if the offer was explicit.
I think a lot of people think that people should not be allowed to make choices like that, like choices that could be potentially harmful for them.
Yeah, it's too
what did I just say about people being busybodies?
Go ahead.
Well, I don't know. I'm just thinking of like the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire and like children working in factories, and like, we kind of, I don't know. That's where I start getting uncomfortable with it, because it feels like it seems too easy to imagine a world where people are basically coerced to work in, to like have children working in factories, or to accept a job at the Triangle Shirtwaist factory, because there's not that like swath of options for them. I don't know if I articulated that well. Just
No, I think you raise a good point, and I'm trying to find the exact phrasing that David used in the example from the last episode in the notes, but it was like it was at the end about minimum wage, but this is sort of related to that because like you know if I forget how you phrased it, but it was nice and succinct, but I'll try and do a good job summarizing it. Like if I want to hire somebody to help build a fence or something, what's the minimum amount that I should before I can offer them before the government comes in and says no, that's not enough.
Yeah.
Like,
So the way I put it was, if there is a voluntary transaction where you want to do a thing and someone else wants to do that thing with you, whether it be working for wages or exchanging goods for money or whatever, what are the requirements where third parties are licensed to step in and prevent that transaction?
yeah, I like that because we like Jay said, like there's this kind of like uncomfortable reaction about like, well, I suppose if you offered my kids $60 an hour to work at your factory, because their hands are small enough to fit in the machines or something, I might be inclined to take that, especially if I was desperate. But like something about that, I feel like it's a mark of a civilized society that we don't have kids, breathing factory smoke, working in factories, getting their hands lopped off.
So you are correct that is a mark of a civilized society, and that's why child labor was more or less eliminated before there were child labor laws. The implementation of child labor laws were basically the government coming in and claiming credit for eliminating something that free markets had eliminated basically a decade earlier.
Then to take adults, then I mean, like in the U.S. and maybe in most of the world, I'm not allowed to sell my organs like voluntarily.
Yeah, I just think that's nuts.
See,
there's a massive kidney shortage that could be solved in this country,
and that's kind of where I'm on the fence. And so like this is less of like a challenge the one perspective or another, and I'm kind of just tossing this out there because you're right. A lot of people need livers. A lot of people need kidneys. You could donate a lobe of your liver without any without losing your life. You can donate a kidney.
Livers are weird.
Livers are weird.
You can just cut a chunk out of it and it grows back.
And you need one to live, hence the name.
Damn it, you made me laugh at a pun. How dare you?
I just wanted to get that proof on the air.
I think that's the first time I've seen Idiosh laugh at a pun.
Fuck. So, like, I get we could solve this problem by saying, hey, look, who wants a kidney? But then, like, I just have this gross reaction to it. Maybe that's my own weakness, but like, I go soliciting around a poor neighborhood, or I go to war-torn Somalia and say, hey, how about I give you $200 and I get your kidney? And like $200 is, it would really help you in your situation. But like, it feels so, I don't know. I don't icky. Like it. Am I stupid? Do I have a problem, or am I on to some moral importance there? Maybe I should be asking.
Yes, you are stupid. Yeah, no, I mean, if someone wants $200 more than they want a kidney, then like what? That just give them $200. This seems like an obvious, effective altruist equation here.
Well, I think that there's just something like. And this isn't a utilitarian answer, but something net negative, not in the, again, Eudalon calculus, but about taking advantage of super desperate people. Where like if they were able to feed themselves, if they had enough clothes and electricity to live a life, there's no way they would take your shit deal. You could make it even grosser and be like, hey, yeah, sure, I'll salvage you and your family from this war-torn nation. Y'all can live in my house, but I get to fuck you and your kids whenever I want. Like, I mean, you can make this as gross as you want. Somebody might be desperate enough to take that deal, but like, that's still terrible. And I like the idea of someone with a big stick said, no, fuck you, I'm not letting you do that. Now, granted, Steven? The counterpoint is that they stay in the war-torn nation and get killed.
Well, other counterpoint, would you be somebody's slave for 8 hours a day if you didn't need their money to pay your mortgage and food bills?
I mean, I think you're being pretty loose and fast with your use of the word slave.
You are sacrificing hours of your life every day to do something you would rather not be doing.
I mean,
because they're willing to give you money.
Sure.
You only get so many hours of life, and they are stealing it just because they have money.
They aren't stealing it. They're purchasing it.
On this side of it, though, I'm on David's. I'm on the other side of the fence, where it's like, if someone, so I've had jobs where it was not worth the money to do that job, and it took risks and work, but I got other jobs where now I'm, I feel like I'm getting enough bang for my buck, and like I like having money, right? And so like I like being able to go to the grocery store without having to check my bank account. Like, so those are freedoms. Those are freedoms I have now that I didn't before, where like I'm willing to exchange the time that I give to my employer for that. Like, so that's less about slavery, and it's more about my personal empowerment, right?
And it's like about reality too.
And so like,
is it that different from any other transaction of giving something of yourself for money?
And so that again, I think that this is, and I know we've moved pretty far afield from libertarianism, but this is just something where I found an opportunity to shoehorn in something I've been tossing around for years without any consensus in my own brain. So like, it's, and
I do want to say I'm not actually on the side necessarily that I'm advocating. I just am presenting that side.
No, steel manning's important. But yeah, I guess you want to make clear that you're steel manning and not standing up for it. So like, I don't know. I think again, if you take it to the gross extreme, where you're saving a family, but in exchange for all this horrible shit, and they're really torn. Like on the one hand, it's like going to like a drought-stricken area and selling bottled water for $15 a bottle, where it costs you 8 cents a bottle or something, right? Like, you get to make a killing, and they need the water. They need the water more than they need $15 because they and their kids are dying.
Drink money.
Right. So like, I realize that like if I were to step in as the government and just say no, then those people all dehydrate to death. Like that's not an optimal solution, but like,
the high price of water was a motivation to get people to bottle up water and drag it out there.
Yeah, no. So the solution that you're looking for is not to ban the transaction. It's to make sure that people have enough money and other resources that they never have to worry about taking one of those shit deals. Yes. And like, and I think that it's pretty clear that the general efficiency and economic growth from having a less regulated, freer society will get you a lot of the way there. And then charity will also do a lot for you there. And then, like I said at the top of the first show, I don't consider welfare to be a fight worth fighting now. I think we could probably get away without it for now, or not for now, but in an ideal situation. But if I'm wrong about that, then I am definitely okay having some sort of UBI. And I am definitely putting those last on the chopping block for my incrementalist anarcho-capitalist fantasies.
Can I make a case for the busybodies real quick, just to take the other side here?
You can, but I'm probably going to laugh at you.
Okay. That's okay. So the case for the busybodies is there is a lot of people who live as if they're not going to see 22. Like, there's that old song by Coolio, I forget it is. You're
looking at me like I have
Paradise.
Yeah, Gangster's Paradise. I forget the exact line, but he's like, will I live to see 24? I don't know. And a lot of people live their lives that way, where they're like, you know what? I don't even know if I'm going to be alive in a year. I'm going to take whatever risks and shit-ass deals I need because it doesn't matter to me. I guess future me can go fuck himself, or call it a high time, what is it? High time discount?
High time preference.
High time preference, yeah.
Hang on. I always get mixed up which one's high and which one's low.
Well, one of those.
Yeah.
Time preference is
okay. High time preference means you are impatient.
Okay.
Because you have a high preference for having things sooner rather than later.
Okay, a high time preference. And the thing is that they're wrong in their estimation, statistically speaking. So in the end, it turns out that society is saddled with a lot of people who made short-term good choices, which are horrendous long-term choices. They now have 0 kidneys because they sold them both. And all of us are left paying the bill. They can't work. This is terrible.
They're
And
on dialysis.
they're on dialysis. We're not just going to let them die. And so it's in society's interest to be like, if we're the type of society that doesn't just let people die in a gutter and we are taking care of them, then we have to curtail some of their worst choices, such as whether they can sell their kidneys, for example, or, I don't know, something else.
Climate change might be a stand of that position, right?
Yeah.
It's the busybodies saying, no, you can't pump all that smog into the air to do this when you can pay more to do it cleanly.
It's the OSHA busybodies that say, no, you can't work in that coal mine without any air filtering because you'll get black lung and be hospitalized at 40 before you die at 50 after 10 years of expensive care. Even if it costs your employer more, he hires less people and you make less, it's still not worth it to society, so fuck off.
I actually think the environmentalist point is one of the stronger arguments against libertarianism.
Yeah, so so the question there is, who is better at making decisions for you personally? You or Miss Grundy down the street?
For me personally, it's me, but I realize not everyone is as smart and well-informed as I am.
Sure, but how are you going to generalize that principle? Because if you are going to say, for example, that people can only fly planes if they meet these very, very stringent standards that maybe some people would rather not have, well, then you've just regulated flying cars out of existence. And God only knows what sort of economic gains we would have if we had actually had flying cars, to say nothing of just, being able to visit relatives that are 6-hour drives and half-hour flights away.
I'm with Jace. I am a big fan that we don't have flying cars. Like, my bedroom's on the second floor. I love the idea that I'm not going to be killed by a drunk driver while I'm sleeping in bed.
People can barely drive cars on the ground. Like, we don't need to be... No.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, no.
Sounds like a cash thought.
So flying cars would be a lot safer than ground cars.
Somehow.
Just because there's a lot less...
That is getting way far afield, and
I really want to see this brawl, though.
Yeah, I would refer everyone to the book "Where's My Flying Car" by J. Storrs Hall for the long version.
You were supposed to do a special Mind Killer episode about that book. We're waiting for it still.
Yes. So I offered to do an audiobook version. And the author said, that sounds awesome, except I'm in the middle of getting it republished. And I'm not sure the new publisher would be as fond of it as I am. And I said, cool, I am happy to do it on any terms your publisher sees fit, including releasing it through Audible or some other more formal channel. And I never heard back, so...
Wait, did you just reach out to the author and say, like, I'd like to do an audiobook of your book?
Yes.
Can you do that?
Yeah.
Shit, I should do that.
You're allowed to talk to people.
I guess.
Yeah.
It's a free country,
I know.
sort of.
Also, I have found that the phrase, I'm contacting you on the advice of my dissertation supervisor, Robin Hansen, is downright magical.
So once the 6-month mark ticks over, you should contact him again.
Okay.
But to Jace's point, unless you were going to make another one, I'm curious about the environmental, because that is an example of like a short-term gain for long-term fuck yous, except even the long-term isn't even you in 5 years, it's your neighbor's kids and your kids.
So
we talked about the environmental thing last episode, though.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if we fully addressed the previous point. If we didn't, then let me know on Reddit or Discord, and I'll flesh that idea out some more. But onto the environmental stuff, I mean, again, there's the same problem. Like, if you have the environmental impacts being so abstract and in the future, then like that's obviously something that democracies have trouble handling, as well as libertarian societies. And if you have a tort system that's capable of handling that sort of class action, which we plausibly would under a more libertarian society, even though we don't now,
How do you sue people that have been dead for 60 years?
So an example
Get
of
reparations
how
from their descendants.
anarcho-capitalists would handle that is like if you own a beachfront property in Miami, you say, hey, I have this building that to all rights should stand and generate profits for 200 more years, but because of global warming, it's going to be underwater in 30. And then you can sue people who emit carbon as whatever class and say you owe me some suitably discounted 170 years worth of profits for this location. Fork it over.
This is why I was more interested in doing the anarcho-capitalism, because I don't know about y'all, but I'm already leaning pretty libertarian myself. I'm having a hard time, like, even coming up with objections beside, like, beyond the standard ones, like the environmental, the prison privatization, gun control, like, and it's all stuff people have talked about to death.
I do think there's some case for some level of busybodiness that is, non-zero.
And non-ridiculous. Like, I mean, even if, and I get, like, this would be a risk I take as a worker going to the office or something, but, like, if I'm working downtown and then they erect a building next to mine that has no safety standards and I, am worried it's going to catch fire and probably will, my options are quit my job or, like, wish I lived in a world where they weren't allowed to build such a dangerous building, right? Like,
nope, you're missing the third option.
Hire hitmen.
Sue them.
You can't sue them before it catches on fire, though.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess that's.
If it's a provable hazard, then sure you can.
But would I be able to in a like? I can only do that because there are safety standards now. If safety standards were a thing that we did away with because the busybodies got annoying, like, am I just I guess who would even be willing to hear the case? Like,
so there are. So in addition to anti-corruption, there are also other things that courts can compete on, and this would be getting well afield of where we are right now to explain why this is true. But there are reasons to believe that offering strict liability for cases where strict liability is efficient would be a thing that some of those courts would compete on. So it's like explaining why exactly that's true would be really quite complicated.
What motivation does the person who built the dangerous building have to go with the strict liability court?
Let's see how to do this in 3 minutes.
Feel free to take 7 minutes for this one.
Okay. So essentially, if a court didn't offer strict liability for violating safety standards, if it's economically efficient, then they would essentially offer judgments in favor of people who didn't violate the safety standard. So someone's got to be losing profits here somewhere.
This is for
This is
for anarcho-capitalism, right?
Yes.
For libertarianism, you don't have the option of going to other courts, though. You only have the state court.
But for libertarianism, like I said, welfare is the last thing on the chopping block. OSHA and some other things like that would be like second to last.
Okay. So realistically, libertarianism is not going to get rid of that.
Probably not.
Nope.
Yeah. And then if I'd need to like draw some graphs and stuff to figure out why competitive courts would offer strict liability if it was efficient. But I'm not sure that's something I can do on the fly. So if you're curious about that, hit me up on Reddit or the Discord and I'll explain it there.
I think one of the major problems is people always have something they like about government, and whenever you bring up libertarianism, since its main thing is like reducing the size and scope of government, they will bring up the thing about government they like best and say, why would you want to reduce this, you monster?
I mean, yeah, like I said, libertarianism has bad PR, and I'm not sure how to fix that. Sorry if that's an unsatisfying answer, but like, I know what side I'm on.
No, the truth.
Scout mindset.
The honest. Speaking of, free plug for Julia Galef's book. I think it's called The Scout Mindset.
It is.
She just finished writing it. It's available for pre-order. She said she put a link in the Rationally Speaking episode that came out yesterday, and she didn't. But if you Google it on Amazon,
damn it, Julia, there should be a law.
What was the title?
The Scout Mindset.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And the audiobook is available, read by Julia Galef, so I'm buying that.
Nice.
Or will be available in mid-April.
Oh.
Did you have any more anarcho-capitalism questions or anything?
Oh, well,
Or
anarcho-capital, yeah, because...
I mean...
Maybe it would just be better if libertarianism actually had an ordered list of what would be chopped first, so that people who say stop getting rid of the regulations that keep people safe in the coal mines could be responded with, you know what, once we've solved wars and pollution and poverty, then we'll get to the coal mine safety standards to axe.
So that would be a great idea, except if you put 10 libertarians in a room, they would soon come up with 11 lists of what needs to be cut. And the logical organization to actually put that together is the U.S. Libertarian Party. And they are full of just horrendously stupid chuckle fucks.
Okay, hold on a sec. If the main party in the U.S. pushing libertarianism is full of horrendously stupid chuckle fucks, how can you expect anyone to take this seriously?
I mean, we all being Democrat, but a lot of Democrats are stupid.
Because we also have the likes of Tyler Cowen, Alex Tabarrok, Brian Kaplan, to some extent Larry Summers. Like, basically, the reason why libertarianism is still a intellectually respectable movement is because, and this is actually true, Brian Kaplan did a survey on this, the smarter you are, the more libertarian you are.
Yeah, but if the libertarians cannot coordinate well enough to even form like think tanks and PR groups that employ these people.
Oh, we have think tanks and PR groups. They just try to distance themselves from the LP because the LP is full of morons. But yeah, you look at Cato, to some extent Brookings, plus a bunch of smaller think tanks. Like, there are some very serious libertarian policy institutes. And also there's Reason Magazine, which is by far the best mainstream media looking thing that still exists.
Plug. Yeah, Reason Magazine is awesome.
Yeah. So like there are some other groups which would definitely do a better job than the LP, but like they don't really have quite the same political cachet. And like I said, public relations isn't my department, so like that's my best shot at addressing that, but mostly I just have to acknowledge that that is definitely a problem.
So I'm hearing what we got to do is infiltrate the LP and stage a soft coup from the inside like happened to the Republicans in the 80s?
Unfortunately, after Gary Johnson and Bill Weld lost the presidency, even though no one expected them to win, and they actually significantly outperformed expectations, the LP put in a bunch of new rules that make soft coups almost impossible because they are just determined to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory at every possible opportunity.
All right, truncheons and hard coups it is.
Yep.
Assassinations.
Although, unfortunately, LP meetings tend to be about as heavily armed in total number of guns as Republican meetings, and they are much less heavily attended. So we're talking about much higher densities of firearms per person.
but admittedly, that's all due to Guns George, who brings 8,000 guns to every meeting.
Unfortunately, no. Like, that's a great bit and a really good goof, but no.
Okay, man, the only things I'm left are like the main things I'm left with are ridiculous questions, and like I want to hear about the anarcho-capitalist historical precedents, like what the heck's going on with Gaelic Ireland, and I also
I'm actually surprised Gaelic Ireland's on there because I'm pretty sure that they were very much not anarcho-capitalist. They were pretty dang
my
statist.
understanding was the
Oh yeah, that's it looks like just Rothbard said that they were anarcho-capitalist and Rothbard was a complete crank and a moron and also a racist.
I like how it's like I disagreed with him. Also, he's racist. So y'all know you don't have to look into him to disagree with me. To disagree with him too.
Oh no! Please, by all means, look into him. He very much wears his colors on his sleeve, which I appreciate.
Can I ask more silly questions?
Please,
Yeah.
this is a great.
Also, we do have a list of questions from random people on my Facebook. If
we
you
might
want
have
to
like
go over
better
to those.
questions.
I want one or two from Jace before we take the community questions.
Okay, so what's paleo-libertarianism?
What was that?
What?
Paleo-libertarian. Okay, I'm looking again at the
Paleo-libertarianism?
Wikipedia article about libertarianism.
Yeah,
And
so
see, also we've got like libertarian feminism, and
I like the sound of that one.
paleo-libertarianism, and I just like that they also have links to property is theft ! And taxation is theft !
Correct.
Fusionism.
So paleo-libertarianism is paleo-conservatism but libertarian. Paleo-conservatism is conservatism but racist. And by the transitive property, paleo-libertarianism is libertarianism but racist. It is, in fact, the intellectual movement that Murray Rothbard is the father of. They really are just horrifically immoral and ignorant shit boots.
I like how the answer to that was just as great as I could have hoped given the question.
Wow.
So libertarian feminism is pretty much exactly what you'd expect. It's
Wait,
I don't expect anything.
No, I have no idea what to expect.
Okay, so it's basically like one of the themes I've been hitting again and again is that if you have enough people in a society who don't want a thing and that society has a government, then they can stop that thing. And so what you want to do if you like the thing is just minimizing the size and scope of government so that there's more chance of it being able to slip through that crack or slip through the cracks. And if you observe that women's issues are one of those things that lots of people want to regulate, and then you realize that taking women's issues and reproductive rights and women in the workforce and so on out of government hands is the best way to keep the likes of Tom Cotton from getting his way, then that's libertarian feminism.
Huh. I feel like I thought that was going to be a funny answer, and actually I'm like,
nope.
Oh,
So it's basically remove all laws that specifically target one sex from government?
Yeah. So on that definition, I am comfortable calling Ruth Bader Ginsburg at least a libertarian adjacent.
Cool.
All right.
What do you think about the criticism that libertarianism has no explicit theory of liberty?
I will refer you to Scott Alexander's post. I think it is something like Current Affairs, 6 questions for libertarians treated as writing prompts. And in fact, I think that's one of the short ones, so I'll just read the passage. The entire thing is great, by the way, so you should read it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's true of everything Scott's ever written, so.
Not wrong. The question from Current Affairs is, can you construct a theory of property rights that does not suffer from internal incoherence or depend on specious natural law assumptions? Scott writes, Professor Krasinski sat down at her desk and booted up her computer. It was another quiet morning here at the Harvard Philosophy Department. She had won her position as department chair by discovering a complete theory of morality, grounded in first principles with no internal incoherence or any specious assumptions, able to determine everything from the optimum number of minutes speaking to your mother each week, to how close you could come to beggars before you were obligated to give them money. She had just finished checking her emails, mostly invitations to speak at various conferences and events, when something started to stir in the center of the office. It turned into a wind, then a whirlwind, and finally a strange-looking man dressed in silver with gold goggles. Professor, said the traveler, Professor Krasinski, terrible news. The professor, whose mind had plumbed the depths of ontology and ascended the heights of metaphysics, was a hard woman to perturb. Yes, she asked the man, what is it? Suppose there's an evildoer who punishes all evildoers who do not punish themselves. Does the evildoer punish himself or not? Professor Krasinski realized the implications right away. My God, it's a paradox. My complete theory of morality, grounded in first principles with no internal incoherence or species assumptions, able to determine everything from the right amount to tip your waiter to the exact words you need to speak before a sexual act for it to qualify as consensual. It lies in ruins. And that means, began the traveler. That's right, said Professor Krasinski. She and the traveler spoke in unison. Nothing is true and everything is permissible. Come, she said, I've prepared for this day. She took a key out of a potted plant on the windowsill, then used it to open a locked cupboard in her desk. Inside were 2 hatchets. She handed one to the traveler. Where are we going? He asked. To the daycare down the road to hack the limbs off of babies. Obviously. The traveler nodded his approval, and they went off, eyes red with bloodlust.
That was fantastic.
Yeah, I could not have gotten a better response to that question.
So the moral of the story is you're allowed to have some common sense, and just because your moral theory doesn't have or does have some specious assumptions and or internal incoherence doesn't mean that you don't still basically know what's right and wrong. And just because I don't have a super well specified theory of property rights doesn't mean that you don't still basically know what I'm talking about. And sure, that does mean that there are some fuzzy situations around the edges, but it's much easier to just address those fuzzy situations as they arise than to write off the entire theory.
I want to say
2 hatchets.
What?
That was perfect. What's that? Oh, 2 hatchets are going to take care.
We've broken Steven.
I want to save that entire story as a single sound clip to insert randomly, like the ta-da sound.
Yeah, we got to put that out somewhere. That was delightful.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to reluctantly stop asking silly questions, and maybe we could answer some of the serious ones.
I don't think we can possibly do better than that for silly answer or great answer to a silly question. So
okay,
that's a good place to put a pin in it.
Yeah, that made my day. So
yeah, we probably should be calling it soon. Is there anything you want to bring up, or 1 or 2 of those questions that you really like that you want to address?
Let's see. So, we did. Wouldn't libertarians do things I find icky?
Are these the actual phrasings of the questions?
They are the actual phrasings I put on the outline. They aren't the actual phrasings people put in on my Facebook.
I tell you what, there's one on here from you. Wait, but is ideal government better than ideal markets? That sounds like a good one to end on. Okay, sure. So this is a fun little question. Just to clarify about the bonking rule, the bonkable offense isn't bringing up ideals. It's comparing ideals to real life. And this, of course, raises the question,
sure, maybe libertarianism is better in a flawed world where people don't know things or behave immorally, but would it actually be preferable to something like socialism if everyone was perfect and omnibenevolent? And the book on this is called Why Not Capitalism by Jason Brennan. It's very good, and I will give a admittedly flawed summary here. But if you find this question interesting or want to hear a book-length version of my answer, I recommend you check it out.
Just imagine the Zoidberg meme. Why not Zoidberg? I might have to make it.
It's actually riffing off of the book which it's a response to, which is Why Not Socialism, by someone, I can't remember his name, but he's basically just a socialist philosopher doing ideal theory, saying that, sure, there are some practical problems with socialism, but in an ideal world, it would work very well. And Brennan is saying, yes, it would work very well, but capitalism would work even better. And so the short version is essentially there are two problems with central planning, and those are the knowledge problem and the incentive problem. So the incentive problem is how can you get people to do things that are not in their interest, but are in society's interest if you don't pay them. And then the knowledge problem is a bit more abstract, but it's essentially the business of buying and selling communicates through the price mechanism a lot of information about resources and which resources are scarce and what the most efficient use of resources are. And if you're doing ideal theory, then you can basically assume away the incentive problem because people will just act in a socially responsible way. But you still have the knowledge problem. So you would still want something like a market with price mechanisms around just to make sure that that information is generated and communicated in the most efficient way. And the price mechanism is the only way we know how to do that. You also have essentially the Scott Alexander archipelago case, which archipelago is basically an ideal theory version of anarcho-capitalism, where different people will have different conceptions of what the greatest good is, and the way that you allow them to pursue those different conceptions is by having a maximally free society where like-minded people can just organize into their own groups. And the pithy version of this is an ideal socialist society cannot allow you to be an anarcho-capitalist, but in an ideal anarcho-capitalist society, there's nothing preventing you from going off and starting a socialist commune.
I do notice that you slightly changed the question to ideal socialist versus ideal anarcho-capitalist, because in my opinion, an ideal government is a government that is run by God, who is literally omnibenevolent, yeah, and omniscient and all those other things, because such a society would just be perfect if an actual God existed that actually had all the good things.
Yeah, so if you're assuming an omnibenevolent and omniscient
and
omnipotent central planner, then calling it socialism or capitalism or whatever is just kind of quibbling over pointless semantics, because if you have that sort of actor, then you're probably going to just get the ideal outcome.
Yeah.
So a more interesting version of ideal theory is assume that we're talking about normal human people who have the same computational and cognitive constraints, but who are just morally superior and who don't act selfishly, etc., etc.
Oh, in that case,
and
pockets,
that
definitely.
yeah, and that has a much more interesting answer.
But if you're not going to settle for quitter talk, the answer is make a god and put them in charge.
The answer is always hurry up and become God to any question. All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
this
was
was
awesome.
Fun and informative.
Awesome.
And I hope we weren't too easy on David, since at least 2/3 of us are already libertarian inclined. If people would like to complain, we have both a subreddit and a Discord to do that too. And maybe someday we will yell at David again, but probably you'd be better off hitting him up on the subreddit.
Yeah.
And 1/3 of us does not have anything like an articulate politics. So
if there are any like
Talking
dyed in the wool hardcore communists, like read theory for fun types listening to this, then I either on this podcast, obviously it's not my podcast, so I can't volunteer the feed because I don't own it, because property rights are awesome. But either here or somewhere else, I would be interested in having a discussion and or debate about this. If there is someone who's willing to really go to bat for the other side.
Ooh, okay. Hit us up at BayesianConspiracyPodcast@gmail.com, and we will relay this to David.
Yep.
Yeah,
Or, as always, you can get in touch with me by snail mail at P.O. Box 420, Clemson, South Carolina, 29631. That is a bit. I don't own.
420 was available.
No, that's a bit. If I ever get a P.O. box, I will make sure it's P.O. Box 420. But yeah, I don't actually have a P.O. box. Just get in touch with me on Discord or the Reddit.
Okay.
Right on.
All right. We have to thank a patron.
That's right. I don't know whose turn it is.
That's because patronage is a old and venerable free market solution to the problem of paying artists for creating art.
You know, it's a good thing there isn't a minimum wage for podcasting, because otherwise it would be illegal to make this podcast.
Not
You guys
wrong.
are making some compelling points. I just yeah. Okay, so first off, I got to say we're thanking Dina Belenko this time for supporting this episode. I hope you loved that joke, the jokey response that Scott Alexander gave to that question. I will be thinking about it for the rest of the day, and I hope you had fun listening to the episode. And thank you so much for supporting this. You know, you make a good point. It's nice. You know, God, could you imagine if the podcast network charged $200 a month, because there's so much content on there, and you can enjoy as much of it as you want, but you have to pay this minimum subscription fee. No, screw all that. You can listen to most of them for free, and you can support them per your wishes at your whim. And I appreciate that Dina's whim was to support us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dina. You're awesome.
Indeed.
I'm not sure. Maybe we do make more than minimum wage. I should actually run the numbers and find out at some point.
I'm not sure, but I do know that I just added. I don't know why it took me so long, but I finally because I'm never on like my account. I'm on the Bayesian Conspiracies account, but I logged in on mine, so I could send Scott Alexander Wales, so I could sign up for his.
I do want to say I'm sorry if any of that seemed ungrateful on my part. I really do appreciate all our patrons and the money they give, and I was just trying to make some dumb libertarian jokes. Sorry.
Nice save.
I thought they were great libertarian jokes.
And we've got the best judge for it. All right, that was awesome. I don't have anything else to add other than if somehow you're unaware that Enosh and I are doing a podcast called Not Everything is a Clue, where we're going through We Want More style for Worth the Candle. Check it out. I'm having a great time reading and recording it. So
it is a lot of fun. The story's amazing. Steven's doing a great time being paranoid.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you really honed the art.
I'm trying to keep it up there.
Oh, as long as we're plugging things, I wrote a novel a few years ago called What Lies Dreaming, and several people on the Discord got together and created an audiobook version of that, which is fucking awesome. Thank you guys. That is the most amazing gift. It is now available at Audible and Amazon and wherever. Like, if you didn't buy the book before because you don't like reading with your eyes, now you can read it with your ears.
That's awesome. You got it on Amazon.
Yeah. It'll be it's already available as of this recording.
I
So
have nothing to plug, but I like those things. So yeah.
While we're plugging things, I also have another podcast in addition to the Mind Killers. I have plugged it over there, but I'll do it here as well because you guys have a much larger audience, which I will happily mooch off of. It is the Pokemon Primeval podcast. It is a Blades in the Dark actual play set in a post-apocalyptic version of the Pokemon universe. And one of the bad guy factions is revanchist communists from the not Russia region. So yeah, check it out.
That's outstanding. Would it spoiler any part of your story or anything to say how it got post-apocalyptic?
Yes, that is literally like one of the big mysteries that I am queuing up.
How exciting.
If you're familiar with the tropes of Ratfake, it probably won't be terribly hard to figure out, but most of my audience isn't, so fuck them.
Send us a link to that, and we'll put it up in the show notes.
Will do.
Cool, thanks. All right, thank you for joining us, and everyone, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.